Well, U.S. President Joe Biden meets his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, today via video. They'll be discussing Russia's troop buildup on its border with Ukraine. The U.S. has threatened severe economic consequences if Russia invades its neighbor. In recent weeks, the U.S. has reported that Russian troops were massing in several locations close to Ukraine and Belarus. Moscow says it wants security guarantees from neighboring countries and NATO.
Not the best of friends. U.S. President Joe Biden and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin last met in June. Since then, tensions over Ukraine have grown worse. Both sides say the other is trying to destabilize the region. Russia fears that the West is trying to weaken Russian security by pushing Ukraine to join the NATO military alliance. Putin has said that would be a red line. For the West, Russia's buildup of troops along the border is an escalation.
We were aware of Russia's actions for a long time, and my expectation is we're going to have a long discussion. I won't accept anybody's red line.
Russia says it's the U.S. and NATO that are responsible for any tensions. The threat on our western border is really growing. See how close NATO military infrastructure has moved to Russia's borders. This is more than serious for us. Analysts say the situation is fragile. On the eve of the meeting, the Kremlin said U.S.-Russian relations were in a lamentable state. And there are many ways Moscow's troop buildup could go wrong, even if it is just a bargaining tactic.
No matter what Putin intends, the possibility of accident or incident leading to a hot crisis is very real. So I think it's a very concerning situation. I do think that he is setting up, in some ways, his conversation with Biden. But frankly, I think Biden, in many ways, has the upper hand here because Putin very much wants this meeting with Biden.
Russia wants a, quote, security guarantee from Biden, meaning that Ukraine will not join NATO and that U.S.-backed forces will not come up to the Russian border. But those are assurances Biden is unlikely to give.
Let's bring in Margareta Klein here. She's an expert on Russia and Eastern Europe at the German Institute for International and Security Affairs. Thanks for being with us this morning. Dr. Klein, we keep hearing about rising tensions in the Ukraine-Russia conflict. How close are we to escalation on the ground?
Well, the potential for escalation, either intended or unintended, seems to be quite high. We observe unusual troop movements and deployments by Russian armed forces on the border to Ukraine, an exercise on Crimean Peninsula, increasing clashes on the front line in Donbass, and an increasing belligerent and provocative rhetoric by the Russian leadership towards Ukraine. So we don't know the Kremlin's intentions, whether it is actually about intervention, whether it is about show of force to force the US to enter into high-level negotiations, or whether it is just about keeping Ukraine in a permanent state of tensions and making it unable for the Ukrainian leadership to consolidate domestically and economically. But
so
what
you're
we
saying
see
it's...
is a...
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. But the potential for miscalculation, for unintended clashes, for a spiral of escalation is really high.
Right. Now, many people, you mentioned several different factors that are playing into this, but the buildup of Russian troops on that border to Ukraine has got many people very worried. They say that there's really quite a serious risk of this going wrong. Why is this happening now?
Well, the underlying conflict about the normative and institutional order in Eurasia and Eastern Europe is quite old, since the 90s. But what is new and what has changed is a growing frustration on the side by the Kremlin with regard to Zelensky, for example, who restricted Russian influence in Ukraine, with regard to the US, that has not entered into such kind of a high-level permanent dialogue with Russia that would recognize it as a great power, and with regard to the strategic partnership between the US and Ukraine, that even without a formal NATO membership, enhances the military cooperation between the US and Ukraine and putting Ukraine closer to NATO.
If Russia's president does decide to invade Ukraine, who or what do you think could stop him?
Well, it's really hard to assess the cost-benefit calculation of the Kremlin. But the key would be Western unity coupled with a credible threat of harmful countermeasures. For example, excluding Russia from SWIFT agreement, canceling Nord Stream 2 pipeline, or freezing assets of oligarchs that are close to Putin. And furthermore, more military assistance to Ukraine.
Okay. Margareta Klein there from the German Institute for International and Security Affairs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.